There's a piece of advice about Social Security that gets repeated constantly online, and it sounds completely reasonable. Claim early. Take it at 62 because you never know how long you've got, and you might as well get your money while you can. That's some very sound logic. It has just one flaw. It's true that nobody knows when they're going to die, but that works both ways. Nobody knows how long they're going to live either. And that same uncertainty is exactly why claiming early just in case is not the safe choice people think it is. I'm a certified financial planner and the founder of Golden Wealth Strategies. I've partnered with AARP on educating people about exactly this kind of decision and helped multiple people navigate this Social Security question. So in this video, I want to take you through the biggest Social Security mistakes I see retirees make that cost them thousands of dollars, why this mistake happens, and how to make sure you avoid making it. Social Security comes up in almost every conversation I have with people approaching retirement. And it's the decision I see people get wrong most often, usually for very understandable reasons. So let's talk about how to get it right. What's actually at stake? Let's start with the numbers, because most people have never seen them laid out clearly. The earliest you can claim Social Security is 62. Your full retirement age, if you were born in 1960 or later, is 67. And you can keep delaying up to age 70, but no further because the credits stop there. Here's what those choices do to your check. Claim at age 62 and your benefit is permanently reduced by 30%. Not for a few years, permanently. Wait until age 70 and you earn delayed retirement credits of roughly 8% for every year past your full retirement age, which adds up to about 24% on top of your full benefit. So put those together. The gap between claiming at the earliest moment and the latest is roughly 54 percentage points. To put that in an example, let's say your full benefit at 67 would be $2,500 a month, and your household needs about $4,500 a month to live on. Whatever Social Security doesn't cover, you're pulling from your own savings. Claim at 62, and your check is permanently cut to $1,750. So your portfolio has to produce the other $2,750 every single month. Wait until age 70 and your check grows to about $3,100 a month. Now your portfolio only has to cover $1,400 a month. So let me be clear about what the mistake actually is. The mistake isn't claiming at 62. For some people, claiming at 62 is honestly the right call. The mistake is claiming without ever running a real analysis first. Filing at the earliest possible moment because that's what your neighbor did or because a video told you to do that, without anyone ever looking at your health, your accounts, your tax situation, or your actual plans is the real issue that costs people thousands of dollars. Now, that comparison describes life after your benefits start. It doesn't describe the years in between. If you retire early and wait until 70 to claim, your savings carry the whole load until then. And for some people, that's simply not doable. So delaying isn't free. It front loads the pressure on your savings and back loads your guaranteed income, which is the whole reason it comes down to your specific situation, not a rule. If you're approaching this choice and second guessing yourself, you can book a free call with me at the link in the description. We'll look at your actual situation, not a rule of thumb, and figure out what makes sense for you specifically. Part 2. The break-even math and why it isn't the whole answer. The common response to this Social Security question is a break-even analysis. Claim early and you get smaller checks for more years. Claim late and you get bigger checks for fewer years. At some point, the totals cross over. For most people, that crossover lands somewhere around age 80 to 83. So the question everyone asks is, will I make it past the break-even age? And here's where the claim early just in case advice can sometimes fall apart. Because statistically, Most people do. According to the CDC data published this year, a woman who reaches 65 can expect to live about 20.8 more years on average. That's to roughly age 86. For men, it's 18.4 years to about 83. So the average woman claiming at 62 to protect against dying early is actually protecting against the less likely outcome. And the risk she's taking on instead, living well into her late 80s on a permanently reduced check, is the more likely one. But I want to be very careful here because break-even analysis is a tool, not an answer. It treats your Social Security decision as a math problem when it's really a planning problem. It ignores your health. It ignores your taxes. It ignores what else you own and how it's structured. It ignores whether you have a spouse whose income depends on your decision, which is exactly why the real mistake is skipping the analysis, not picking a number. So what does good analysis actually look like? Here's what I look at. First, your health and your family's health. Not just how you feel today, your family history, what your parents and grandparents lived to, whether there are conditions that run in your family. This is the single biggest input into the decision, and it's the one people treat most casually. And be honest with yourself in both directions. If you have a serious health condition, claiming earlier may genuinely be right for you. If your mother is 94 and still driving, and your dad is 95 and active daily, well, plan accordingly. Second, long-term care. To put it bluntly, healthcare and long-term care are the most expensive and fastest inflating categories of spending that you will face in retirement. And the costs land late. In your 80s and 90s, not your 60s. Now, think about what Social Security actually is. It's inflation-adjusted income that arrives every month and never runs out no matter how long you live, which means the bigger your check, the more support you have in exactly the years when your costs are highest and your other accounts have been drawn down the most. Delaying isn't only about total lifetime dollars. It's about how much protected income you have at 88 when you need it most. Third, your accounts and your tax picture. Social Security doesn't exist in isolation. When you claim changes your taxable income, which changes your tax bracket, which affects your Medicare premiums 2 years later, and which changes how much room you have for things like Roth conversions. I've talked in other videos about the window between retiring and required distributions starting at 73. When your income is often at its lowest, claiming Social Security fills up part of that window. Sometimes that's fine. Sometimes it quietly closes off a strategy worth far more than the checks you'd have collected. You can't see the trade-off without looking at everything together. And if you're married, widowed, divorced, your survivor benefit. This one matters enormously. When one spouse dies, the surviving spouse doesn't keep both checks. They keep the larger one. And that survivor benefit can be up to 100% of what the deceased spouse was receiving, including any delayed credits they earned. So if the higher earner delays to 70, they're just increasing their own check. They're setting the income floor for whichever of them lives longer. And given the longevity numbers I mentioned earlier, that's more often the wife. There's a second piece to this that catches widows completely off guard. When your spouse dies, you lose one Social Security check, but you also stop filing jointly. You file as a single person on compressed tax brackets, often with barely reduced income. Less money coming in and a higher tax rate on it, that's sometimes called the widow's penalty. And it's the kind of thing you plan for years ahead or you don't plan for it at all. And if you're divorced, you may be able to claim on your ex-spouse's record if the marriage lasted at least 10 years without affecting anything they receive. A lot of women simply don't know that's available to them. What most people will end up retired with is a pile of savings that they're responsible for turning into income. And Social Security, which is the one piece that behaves like a pension, guaranteed, inflation adjusted, and impossible to outlive. That makes it the foundation of your retirement income, not an afterthought. And it deserves to be structured deliberately alongside everything else you own rather than filed for on a Tuesday afternoon because you turned 62. So the takeaway is this. There's no universally right claiming age for Social Security. Anyone who tells you 62 is always right or 70 is always right is selling you a rule instead of a plan. What's right depends on your health, your family history, and your other accounts, your tax situation, and who depends on you. Get the analysis done. Review it as things change because they will. And if you can, have someone walk through it with you who does this every day. If you're anywhere near this decision, please don't guess at it. This is one of the few retirement choices that's effectively permanent, and it's worth a couple of hours of real thought. If you want me to help you run through this, you can book a free call using the link in the description. We can help you look at your entire situation, run the numbers, and make sure that when you do claim, you're doing it on purpose. But even once you've sorted out when to claim your Social Security, how do you make sure you're retiring competently without any regrets? Watch this next video here to learn about the 5 biggest retirement regrets that high earners have and exactly how to avoid them.